and welcome to one of our brief chats with people in the know about either saving Union Station, securing the Southeastern passenger rail route through Goldsboro, or improving our regional freight rail system. This chat will feature Mr. Gene Rees, a resident not of Goldsboro, but of Mount Airy, North Carolina. Gene is the owner of F. Rees Company, a clothing store in downtown Mount Airy, and a developer that has made a name for himself for rehabbing historic mills and other large buildings. He is also a North Carolina Main Street champion and has worked tirelessly as a volunteer to help their downtown organization get to where they are today. He also has ties to Goldsboro and was part of a team that conducted a feasibility study of Goldsboro's Union Station in 2019. I am Julie Metz, the host of this discussion, and I'm a member of the Saving Union Station Committee. I am going to welcome Gene now. Gene, I'm so excited to have you here today. If you'll turn on your video so everybody can see you, that would be great.
Okay.
There you are. I'm going to ask you a series of questions about your experiences and takes on Union Station. But before I begin, please tell everyone just a little bit about yourself.
All right, go ahead.
All right. Can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, Gene?
Well, I'm a native of Mount Airy. I've been back there after school for 47 years, and my father had a men's, or we still have it, men's and women's clothing store, higher end clothing store, still there. I'm not active in it, but for the last, I guess, 35 years, I've been fairly active in development work, and specifically downtown development work and historic preservation. So obviously I'm a big believer in it and have gotten to see firsthand what that type of work does to a town that goes from dead to alive, basically, as most of our towns in the Southeast that were mill towns lost all the employment base, and how it's that historic preservation process and downtown redevelopment has resurrected a town that otherwise would be not as vibrant as it is now.
I mentioned to everybody that you have ties to Goldsboro. You might want to share your personal relationship with Lee and Mary Mills Borden and how you have come to know Goldsboro through them.
Yes, one of the large mill owners in Goldsboro in its earlier textile years was the Borden, I guess it was a spinning mill, large mill, probably 100,000 plus square feet. And I think he's the grandson of the owner, still owns it, named Lee Borden, married a girl who grew up across the street from where my wife and I live. And I see them frequently, particularly when her parents were living. And I'd been to Goldsboro a few times to look at the Borden mills with Lee, and I was not successful in getting him to develop it, but I'm still hopeful. But during all that, those trips to Goldsboro, I ran into Julie, and I'll brag on Julie for a minute, but she was just an extraordinary director, and I put a lot of success of Goldsboro on her shoulders. But anyway, through that connection, I would seen Julie at a few of the Main Street meetings, and then maybe 6 years ago or so, when the Union Station or the city of Goldsboro rather hired a consulting firm, Benchmark Consulting, to do a feasibility study on the Union Station. I was part of their team and made a number of trips down to Goldsboro with interviews. And of course, I quickly concluded that building is so significant for a town. Every town has a few buildings they cannot lose. In Goldsboro, the Union Station is a building that cannot be lost. And so anyway, that sums that up.
So from your personal experience, why do you think historic buildings are so important to save, particularly for smaller rural communities?
It depends on particularly in rural communities, depends on what you want your town to look like. And I doubt many people would come to our town to see our Walmart Kentucky Fried Chicken strip. I think they go to towns to see buildings that reflect the character of the town, the history of the town, in our particular case, we have a number of large historic mills. The world's largest granite quarry is in our town. And so we have a lot of granite buildings, and those are all very historic in nature. And most of them, whether it's the mills or even our granite buildings that are really old, a number of them had gotten in disrepair. And so our town made a conscious effort to, resurrect our downtown and restore a number of these buildings. And as a result, it drives tourism. In our particular case, our retail sales per capita in the western part of North Carolina of towns, under 100,000, Mount Airy and Waynesville are a few notches above any other town in the western part of the state, I think, except Boone, a university town. And that's reflective of our efforts to restore downtown. We have 80 or 90 active stores there, really high-end stores, and our tourism is, for a little town like us, is pretty impressive.
Well, as we've mentioned, you have first-hand knowledge of Union Station. You were part of a team that studied it. You've been there. You've seen it. Can you tell us your reaction to the building when you first saw it and what you can envision for it?
Well, the building was in bad condition, and having done a lot of historic work, it didn't really scare me that much. And the plus of being in bad condition is that the developer is allowed to accumulate more qualified expenses, which they offset with tax credits. And it was, someone's credit, it has been, for the most part, it's been stabilized. The condition is not really worsening, but it's absolutely architecturally critically important to the town. And if it's renovated, it would be spectacular. I mean, if you do it through the Park Service design guidelines, where you put back basically what was there, it'll be something that'll be one of the gems of Goldsboro. And that's easier said than done. It would be expensive, but the payback to the town and county is a multiple of what the cost is to do the work.
Well, you've had, like I said, firsthand experience of this, and you have done a phenomenal job leading the charge for the use of the historic preservation tax credits, and been able to quantify the impacts to the communities where these projects happen. Can you share a little bit of that experience and that information?
Yes. Yeah. I'm in my experience, I've maybe renovated probably 35 downtown buildings and 3-4 large mills, and some pivotal buildings, some contributing buildings. And on each of the development or building restorations or rehabilitations, I retain all my property. I don't flip things. I develop them and keep them. But I keep statistics on all my tenants. Of course, I keep statistics on what it costs to renovate them. And I also keep statistics on how much state and federal tax credits are received. But consistently, the average return to the state by the 5th year, for every dollar of state tax credits they issue to me, the developer, they receive $6.35 in sales tax and payroll tax, state sales tax and state payroll tax. So as I always laugh, I think the best investor in these developments is the state of North Carolina, because they receive, in fact, in most cases, almost all cases, before the state tax credit is even awarded to the developer, more sales tax and payroll tax on construction materials and payroll tax on labor is paid into the state before the tax credit even activates. So the state is money ahead from the time the first hammer is swung. And I apologize for how I look today. I came off a roof for this interview. So that's the story of my life on historic preservation. I'm a very hands-on developer, but it, from the state standpoint, their return is not even talking about the indirect benefits, but the direct dollar for dollar benefits to the state. Again, $6.35 by year 5 for every dollar they issue in tax credits. By year 10, I think it's $13 and change in state and payroll. And the payroll, in that case, it's payroll tax and sales tax on an operating business. So from the construction costs through an habitual business going into a vacant building, the benefit to the state is, again, a multiple of 6. and by year 5, a multiple of over 13 by year 10.
If it trickles that significantly to the state, we can only imagine what it'll do for the local community.
Oh, that's a benefit. We've kind of quantified that, but I will tell you, in our particular case, and I've looked at a number of other towns, whether it's Brevard, Hendersonville, Waynesville, a number of our western part of the state towns that they're comparable to us. They're those that have active downtown preservation programs and active downtown Main Street programs. Those towns that don't allow a large pivotal building to go into derelict condition. I look at their retail sales statistics, and I'm familiar with most all these towns, and the towns that have their eye on historic preservation of buildings like the Union Station, their retail sales per capita are, again, a few notches above those towns that are not. And I won't pick on any towns, the ones that are not doing as well, but the Brevards and Waynesvilles and Hendersonvilles, Mount Airy's and Morganton's, those towns around our neck of the state that have focused on historic preservation, and again, taking care of these pivotal buildings, their returns to, in the county's portion of the sales tax, and of course in property tax for the city and county, the returns there are, again, staggering. I mean, as good as the state, because most towns and counties don't have to subsidize these projects like the state does with these state tax credits. The counties they just get money, property tax money.
Well, I think the last time that you probably have been in Union Station was right around 2019. And just to give you a brief background to also benefit those that might be listening, nothing has been done to Union Station since that time. And needless to say, it's just further deteriorated. And a handful of us, I was asked to come to the DGDC retreat in October of 2023 to talk kind of about the last 20 years of downtown's evolution, and hit the highlights of those things that really had made significance in its improvements. And so at the end of my presentation, of course, the one project that was in my bucket list of things to do before I ever left Goldsboro was Union Station, and I didn't obviously achieve it. So it's always been a thing that bothers me. But anyway, we were talking about it, and there were lots of questions from the room about it. And that discussion got us all fired up again. And there was a handful of us, Doug McGrath, Mark Metzler, and I, that got together after the retreat to talk about, what can we do with Union Station? And the problem, as you know, through the feasibility study that you were part of, there's just so many unknown variables right now. The city doesn't have the ability to rehabilitate it 100% on their own at a cost of $8 to $10 million, whatever that is. And so, and we don't have an identified immediate use for it, right? So, there's discussion again about passenger rail, but we don't know yet. And so it's really hard to find an investor. It's really hard to get the city or the state or the federal government to invest in the building without all these questions answered. So what we decided to do was to narrow our focus and just address the immediate stabilization needs. The property had a 2 to 5 year stabilization Band-Aid put on it back in 2009, and that timeline has extended well beyond its intention. And so we are trying to raise $1.5 million right now to put towards construction for its immediate stabilization needs. We approached the city and the county at the close of 2023, and each of them have agreed to commit $375,000 to do that, as long as the SUS committee, that's me and Mark and Doug and David Perry, will raise an additional $750,000. And so I just want you to talk a little bit about its current condition. The last you saw it, just imagine it, 4 or 5 years later, with no attention to it. And tell us, is it too far gone? Some people that come up to me and they ask, oh, it looks like it just needs to be torn down. There's no way it can be fixed. And please talk to everybody about the importance of stabilizing it now so it can have a future when we're ready for it.
Well, yeah, buildings like that, the complicated buildings like the Union Station, as a developer, you have to take a very long-term view of it, and something the Japanese do real well, I'd say. And obviously, it will require some. When the development happens, it will probably require some county and city and maybe some other grant money to help right-size the investment numbers. In the meantime, what you're doing now is exactly the right thing to do, raising $1.5 million, get it fully stabilized. And if you have to mothball it for 10 more years before it's developed, then so be it. I mean, the stabilization work is not money lost. It's just money that stabilizes it, and that construction those improvements and that stabilization, well, I assume most of it's waterproofing, will protect it and, just be a part of the eventual restoration costs. But I wouldn't blink at doing it. I mean, $1.5 million is cheap to get a building like that stabilized. And from 5 years ago, I mean, it had some areas that needed some serious work, but for the most part, it was pretty much intact. But those areas where it is leaking obviously need to be fixed and need to be fixed permanently, at least until a development plan can come up. And again, it may be 10 more years. I mean, we're working on a Marriott hotel development, historic building downtown. We've been working on it 9 years. That's just how long these big projects take. And I know everyone's impatient and thinks you can snap your fingers and pull off a project like this, but you know better than anybody, Julie, that Julie, I lost you.
You're good. I can hear you now. Yeah.
One thing I would say is give yourself credit that if you said you didn't get that accomplished before you left Goldsboro, you've not given up. You accomplished everything else under the sun down there, and I think the Union Station again that's a capstone project, and there will be a time that someone will develop it. And I'm sure the Rocky Mount Mills was one that was a lost property, and your Capital Broadcast stepped up and got it. McNeil and Kinston was a tough one that developers stepped up and took care of. So all of our towns have projects that look too far gone, but is the right answer to throw up your hands and scrap the building, because whatever you put back will be nothing architecturally even close to what's there now. It's not hardly possible to build what's there now. That train station is an extraordinary building, not just for Goldsboro, for the eastern part of the state, and for the history of rail in our state. And hopefully it'll get used as an active rail station in the future. But if it doesn't, it still has a use that will be that can keep the building viable and support itself. That it's not an ongoing operation. But $1.5 million is cheap money, in my opinion. That's what it takes. It takes $2 million to spend it to get it stabilized.
Well, I thank you for all of this. Do you have any parting words for those that are listening that may benefit them in understanding the importance of this project, or perhaps a call to action that you would make if you were leading this effort?
Well, I would never give up, number one, and understand complicated projects take time. And this, if this were an inline building in a town and didn't have a lot of historic architectural significance, that's one thing. But this building is exceptional architecturally. It's exceptional from its history, and its development will change that whole end of your downtown. And I wouldn't give up on it. I take a very long-term view of it, and whatever you put back there will not generate anywhere close to the community impact that building, that the Union Station will generate for the town. So I'd be patient with it and, understand that it is going to take time, but that just don't give up.
Well, thank you, Gene. I just want to thank you for your time today to do this interview and share your expansive knowledge and firsthand experiences. I've always admired you and consider you to be a mentor. You do these projects to better your community and are always eager to help others do the same in their hometowns. You have worked hard and given your personal time and resources to advocate for the continuation of the state and federal historic preservation tax credits, which are essential to making a lot of these projects happen. And I just want to say you're one of my heroes. So thank you, Gene.
was a mutual feeling. I'm just a glorified carpenter, Julie, as you can tell from looking at me today.
Not at all. Not at all.
I appreciate what y'all are doing, and what you've done has been. I've never really met anybody in this Main Street program quite like you, and that's why I really love working with Lizzie so much, because I see so much of you and her, and it just keeps me at 73 years old. It keeps me kind of energized.
Well, thanks, Gene. I'm going to go ahead and close this out, but before I do, I am going to share my screen. And for anybody that wants to learn more about these projects or to donate to our cause, this first screen right here has a QR code on it. It'll take you to our GoFundMe site. Any amount will be super appreciated. And it's not just us needing to get to that $750,000 to match the city and county to do the actual stabilization work. But I think more importantly, just the overall demonstration of support that your contribution will make a big difference in our ability to secure the Southeastern Passenger Rail Service through Goldsboro with our federal and state partners. And so if you will just give a little bit, we would greatly appreciate it. You can scan that QR code and it'll take you right there. But if checks are more your style, you can make it out to the Downtown Goldsboro Development Corporation, or DGDC for short. And just make a note in the memo that states SUS, Saving Union Station, and we'll make sure that 100% of that contribution goes towards that effort. If you want to learn more about Saving Union Station, Union Station's history, or the Southeastern Passenger Rail project that is ongoing, just scan this QR code and it'll take you to our general website, and you can learn all that you want about those projects. I want to thank everybody for their time and their interest in listening to this chat with Mr. Gene Rees. There will be more chats to come with experts in the field, as well as your local neighbor advocates. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.